All right, we're on Memches Amid Bays on 48b. And just to catch you up, in our previous year, we talked about the Simchas Beis HaShoeva, and in particular, we talked about the Nisa Chayayin and Nisa Chamayim. Uh, whereas the rest of the year, there is the Nisa Chayayin that is brought. What's unique about on Sukkah is that they bring a Nisa Chamayim, they bring a water libation. And the Mishnah described how there were these two receptacles that were on the Mizbeach, and you pour wine into one, you pour water into the other. And that's where we're starting with the Gemara on 48b, Memches Amid Beis. Sminahan Imili. Where do we get this idea? According to Rashi, where do we get this idea of them blowing the shofar while bringing the water libation? So Rav Ina Damar Kra Ushaftem Mayim B'Sason. So the idea of sason, of some kind of rejoicing, indicates that they should be blowing the shofros in a celebratory fashion. Tosos, however, just points out that actually the question is Diminela Demei Hashiluach. It's not a question of why do we sound all of these these notes, but why is it that the water specifically comes from this spring? So, and then it's actually derived from Mimaine Haishua, a mayan from a spring. So that's actually the limit according to a suggestion in Tosfos. Okay. Hano Tre Mini. So I'll, God willing, I was a little tight, but I'm going to for next year. I want to look into just seeing what the Maharsha, see what others have to say. There's probably more here than meets the eye, but we're being told the story. Likely, it's a parable. Hano Tre Mini. There were two heretics. Chad Shmei Sasan v'Chad Shmei Simcha. One had the name Sasan and one had the name Simcha. Amalei Sasan l'Simcha. Sasan said to Simcha, "Ana different minach. I'm better than you." Tichsiv Sasan v'Simcha yasigu. You see, in this pasuk, Sasan precedes Simcha. Amalei Simcha l'Sasan. Simcha says to Sasan, "Ana different minach. I'm better than you." Tichsiv Simcha v'Sasan laYehudim. Ah, there's our Purim tie-in, right? From Megillas Esther. So we see Simcha precedes Sasan. Amrle Sasan Simcha, Cha Yom Shavkucha v'Shavyucha Parvanka, Tichsiv Ki B'Simcha Seitzeu. It sounds like from the pasuk, one day they're going to cast you out from the heavens, and they're going to just, Rashi says the language is, Rashi says, Rutzla Rutzla Fanav, right? So they're just going to be like this guy who's like, running in front of them. You're just going to become a servant, like a shliach. And Amar like Simcha Sason, Simcha is a Sason. Well, Chad Yom Shavkucha, Malabacha Maya, Tichsiv, Ushatamay Bisason. One day they're going to get rid of you and they're going to use you to fill up water. As it says, they'll draw water bisason with sason. So again, God willing, we'll do more of this next week. There's probably more to this parable that meets the eye, but we're not done yet. Amar Lehu Mina Dishmei Sason Rabbi Yevo. There was a heretic with the name Sason who it's funny. I know a lot of people that name Simcha. I don't know a lot of people that name Sason.
Right.
Maybe it's a last name. I like a Sason, right? I've heard of it as a last name, not as a first name. Anyway, so a certain heretic named Sason said to Rabbi Avahu, Asidiso titmalu li mayim alma asi. In the future, they're going to be filling me and giving me water in the world to come. Dichsiv shafta mayim b'sason, right? They're going to be drawing water for Sason. Amar le, no, you're not reading the pasuk right. You have the chsiv lis Sason. If it said with a lamed to Sason for Sason, then kitika amrit. Then it would be as you attempted to interpret it. Hasha dechsiv bisason, then mashidu gavra mishavinli gudo malim be maya. They're gonna take you basically, and it sounds like they'll like skin you or something, and they'll fill you up with water. They'll use you as a vessel, which is not something that sounds very nice about sason. So, okay, we'll do more analysis on this next week,
I'm
God
I'm
willing. But we
to,
have these.
I'm I'm totally confused. So which pasuk are we using? Is it Ushaftamayim or is it
The
Vayhudim
pasuk he's
Haitara
using.
V'Simcha V'Sason?
So the pasuk he's using is what was it? No, that's Shafta Mayim B'Sason. That's the pasuk right here that we're talking about,
Okay.
right? So he's
So
saying it's.
why? So how can you say Simcha? How can one say that Simcha is first of
Oh,
it?
sorry. Oh, sorry. So that was. This is a new story, just about a guy named Sasson, not about Simcha. So there's story number one, which was a heretic named Sasson, a heretic named Simcha, and they went at it. And
Yeah,
then story number two is there is a heretic, might be the same guy, might not. It all might
just
be parallel
Sasson. Yeah,
anyway. What?
just Sasson.
Just Sasson. And he's talking to Rabbi Avahu. And Sasson says, I'm a really hush of a guy because there's a shot to my Sasson. They're going to be filling up water for me in the world to come. And he's like, no, they're going to use you as the vessel to fill up the water. So don't pat yourself on the back so soon. You misinterpreted the pasuk because it's bis Sasson, not lis Sasson, not for Sasson, but with Sasson, using him as a tool, as an instrument.
Uh-huh.
Anyway, back to our feature presentation of understanding the Nisuch HaMayim. So it says in the Mishnah, "Olav hakevesh upana l'smola," that when he would go up to the Mizbeach on the left, after he gets up the ramp, there is the two receptacles, one for the wine and one for the water. Tana Rabbanan, Kol ha'olim leMizbeach olin derech yamin. When you initially go up the Mizbeach, you generally go up the right side. Makifin v'yordan derech small. And basically you go counterclockwise. So you're constantly sticking to the right side. So you go counterclockwise. So you're constantly going to your right. And then the Yordan derech small, you come down the left side. Chutz min ha'ola l'shlosh devarim halalu she'olen derech small, except for one who ascends for these three matters, in which they will go up the left side. V'choser al akev, and then they turn around and make the loop. Ve'eluhain nisa chamayim, the water libation. V'nisa chayayin, the wine libation. Ve'ola sa'ov kisharav sabim mizrach, and an ola for an oaf when there's too much going on the eastern side. The western side is the left side. So in these instances, let's just talk about the water and the wine libation. If you were to look at the mizbeach, when you go up the ramp to your left is where the receptacles are. So it doesn't make sense to go up the right side because then to your immediately on the left when you come on the mizbeach, that's where the two receptacles are. So okay, just I try to visualize. In the Masifta Gemara they have pictures, but I left my Masifta Gemara at Shul, so I can't really show it to you on screen. But take my word for it, or take the Gemara's word for it. Bryce's. El Shahaya Mashchirin. The next part of the Mishnah we're interpreting or expounding upon is that we said even though it was made of limestone, it still became darkened because wine was poured in there. Well, Bishlama de Yayin Mashchir, El Demaya Amai Mashchir. So it makes sense that the receptacle that they pour the wine into darkened because of the wine, but why would the limestone that the water is poured into become darkened? This doesn't seem to be a halachic question. It seems to be more of a mitzias question. Keva de Amar Mar, Ira Shalmayim Lasok Shal Yaim, Vishal Yaim Lasok Shalmayim Yatza, Shalmayim Asil Ashchure. So the reason is because we mentioned in the Mishnah, sometimes the Kohen will make a mistake. You're not doing it all year, so you don't necessarily remember which one goes in which. So he might accidentally pour the water in the wine receptacle and the wine in the water receptacle. And we said if you mix them up, b'diavad, it still fulfills the mitzvah. So there were instances, apparently, where people accidentally poured wine in the water receptacle, and then the wine thereby made the limestone darker. Okay, so makes sense. That's a physical manifestation of a halacha in the Mishnah. Maybe that's the use of it.
Mhm.
Okay. The next part. Umenukavim kimin shnei chotmin. So we mentioned that one receptacle had a thinner, each receptacle had a little pipe spigot or something coming out, like a nose. It looked like a nice, Jewish nose extending essentially. So the one for the wine seems to be the thinner one, and the one for the water is the thinner one, and the one for the wine seems to be the wider one. That's how we described it in the Mishnah. We said one was dakin, one was thin, and one was thick. So Lema Masnis and Rabbi Yehudahi. Let us suggest that at least this part of the Mishnah is in accordance with Rabbi Yehuda, below Rabbanan, and not in accordance with Rabbanan. Now, which machlokis are we referring to? D'Tanan. Rabbi Yehuda Omer belog hayamanase kol shmona di Rabbanan ki adadi ninhu. So the wine is a measurement of 3 lugan, and the water seemingly should also be 3 lugan. That's what the Rabbanan would hold. But Rabbi Yehuda says that the water was only one lug. It was only one. And so for Rabbi Yehuda, it makes sense why there would be a discrepancy between the size of the pipe for the water receptacle versus the one for the wine receptacle. Because we want them basically, the receptacles to empty at the same time. So if there's a lot of wine it needs to go through, you need a wider pipe so more wine can quickly empty out, and you want a thinner pipe for the water so it doesn't quickly empty out. Hopefully that way so they kind of coordinate and empty out at the same time. But the truth is, afilu timu rabbanan chamar samach maya kolish. This can still fit in accordance with the rabbanan that the wine and the water are both three lugin, but the difference is that the wine has a thicker consistency compared to water. So water will flow faster than wine. So we might need a wider pipe for the wine so it could go a little bit faster, which will just basically catch it up to the same velocity as the water. And Hachinami Mistabra, and it seems to be true because the Rabbi Yehuda, Rachav the Katzer Islay, the language of our Mishnah distinguishing between the two receptacles is that one was dak and one was me'uva, um, which only suggests a small discrepancy between them. But Rabbi Yehuda uses the language of Rachav the Katzer. One was wide and one was short, and that seems to, Rashi says, imply a greater discrepancy. The Tanya, Rabbi Huda Omer Shnei Kishvos Hayusham Echad Shamayim ve'Echad Shal Yain. So there's these two kalim, one of water and one for wine. Shal Yain Pia Rachav, Shamayim Pia Katzer. For the wine, it had a wider measurement, and for the water, its dimensions were smaller, were thinner, were shorter. K'dei shu shneim kalim bevas achas, so that they should empty at the same time. But notice that Rabbi Huda uses different language here. He says Rachav versus Katzer, which again, I'm going with Rashi. Rashi tells us apparently there's a greater distinction between Rachav versus Katzer. But in the Mishnah, it uses the language Dak and versus Me'uva, which suggests less of a discrepancy, and that's why the Mishnah is more likely in accordance with the Rabbanan, who only need a slight discrepancy just to account for the more slightly thicker consistency of the wine. But you don't need a huge discrepancy between them because they both are three lugin. They have the same shear in the end of the day. And that's the end of that piece of the Gemara. Our final piece for this evening, Ma'arvo Shel Mayim. So this is going to be basically building off the part of the Mishnah, in which we talked about how there was a guy, and we're told here now that's Tzeduki, one of the Sadducees, who deliberately sabotaged the water libation, and they stoned him, or they esroged him with this rogim. Tanarabanan. So there was an instance in which a Tzeduki Kohen did the libation. Well, he didn't do libation. He just poured it on his feet instead. He was not interested. He didn't recognize the water ritual. Ugamu kolam besrogan. And everyone took their esrogim and they stoned the guy with it. Va'oso hayom nifgama karen hamizbeach. But what happened was, it's like what I get worried when there's a bar mitzvah or an ufraf in shul, and then they all, they throw the candy bags. I'm afraid it's gonna hit the Torah chas v'shalom or knock something down. So this is what happened apparently with the esrogim. They damaged one of the corners of the mizbeach. V'viu bul shel melach usasmuhu, and so they brought a certain measurement of salt to close it off. Lo mimeshu hushel avoda. Now this didn't really. This is like a band-aid. It didn't really re-qualify the mizbeach to be used for temple service. And they shelo yir mizbeach pagum. They just realized that it didn't look nice aesthetically, so they want to do something for the kavod of the mizbeach. Shekol mizbeach she'ein lo kevesh lo keren v'lo yisov lo rivua pasol avoda. If a mizbeach is missing all of these different aspects of it, the ramp, the horns, etc., it's not kosher for avoda. Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda Omer Afasovev, even that rim that goes around it, that's part of the mizbeach. If something happens to any of these things, it's a deficient mizbeach and it's a disqualified mizbeach until it is resolved. So this is interesting. This brisa over here, it doesn't contradict our Mishnah. It just it just gives us a little bit more color to the story. In the Mishnah, all it told us was that some guy sabotaged the Nisa Chamayim and then they stoned him. So now we know it's a Tzeduki. Now we know, unfortunately, the Mizbeach was compromised in the process. They tried to, put something over it temporarily. But what's interesting is that now we learn a certain halacha that there are certain things that could put the Mizbeach out of order ritually. So we'll leave it with that. And hold me to it, Bli Neder. So there's no shir this Thursday because we just did tonight because Thursday night is Purim. So a week from this Thursday, God willing, when we continue, hopefully we'll do a little bit more analysis. I'm curious about the Sasa V'Simcha part. Um, I have this sefer here called Nitzotze Hashas. We haven't looked. Sorry, I know it's blurred. All right, it's blurred, but take my word for it. Which has it's like kind of like Hasid Shavartlach, but also tries to explain agadic portions. So I'm going to take a look at that and see if they have any interesting approaches, and hopefully we'll start off with that next time.
Rabbi,
All
I have a
right.
question
Yeah.
about you mentioned about the mizbeach. If anything is off, then they have to
Not
fix it.
anything. It specifies
Well,
certain things.
certain things, yeah. But
Yeah.
let's just say one of those things is off, and it's time to bring an offering of some kind. Some of them are, I assume, have to be brought on at a certain time. So what do they do if the mizbeach is not in use because it's being repaired or whatever? They have to wait for something to come to repair it.
Yeah, it's a good question. You're right. Like what happens, I don't know, theoretically, if it's knocked out for the entire, regel, then you miss out on those carbonos.
Yes,
Not
that's what
sure.
I'm asking.
I guess that's why we have a Beta Kabayas fund. In Maseches Shkalim, it talks, we talk about how there was general fund for just operational costs of the Beis Hamikdash. So I
Uh-huh.
hope they have some good maintenance staff on hand,
I
ready
was going
to.
to say maybe there's always somebody
I think
that's
there's like a Matt, there'd
uh,
have to be like a Matt
24,
Feinberg or someone who's like,
yeah,
running the show
it's
over there.
a 24/7 maintenance guy, yeah, that can
I'd
fix
have
it.
I'd have to imagine, I'd have to imagine they had some contractor on
Yeah.
staff. I mean,
Yeah.
probably some of them have to be Kohanim if they're handling, things on the inner part of the Beis Hamikdash.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
you need some
Yeah.
handy Kohanim. Uh, all right.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Thank you.
All right. Shkayach.
Are you
Everyone.
okay? You've been coughing.
Yeah, I mean, I had a bad cold or something the previous week, so better
Oh, it's
now, but
hanging. It's
still
hanging. It's
residual.
hanging on. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
It
But
likes you.
yeah, we should all share God willing good news. And also, thinking of Gloria, I know who's a member of us
Yeah.
here who's recovering right now at
Yeah.
Stanford Hospital. So God willing, she should have refuah shalema. We should only share
Yeah.
good news.
Thank you.
All
That's
right,
good.
Afreich
Yeah.
and Purim to everyone.
Thank you to you too and your family.
Thank you.